Ricciardo goes for it from a long way back. This would be sensational if he makes it. And do you know what? He has made it. Smiles will be out at 18 years and 227 days old. Max Verstappen wins a Formula One Grand Prix. Lewis Hamilton wins the Portuguese Grand Prix. Hamilton has more wins than any other driver in Formula One history. And he is not done yet.
Welcome to Getting a Grip F2 and F3, powered by the Inner Sanctum, where we're going to cover the latest news in the world of the driver development formulas. I'm joined by Ali.
Hi.
And Jackie.
Hi.
And we'll just move straight into the news. So we'll start with Liram Zindali. He's been moved up into Formula 2 to the MP Motorsport. What are you guys thinking about the move up?
I think it's a good thing. He obviously didn't have the greatest season in the world, given that he didn't finish in the top 3 last season. But moving up will possibly help him with his development rather than leaving him stuck in F3 for years and years until he just ends up switching to something else. Yeah,
that's it. And I think his development between 2019 and 2020 has been great, even though his 2019 season was a little bit what would the word be, disrupted. The way that he's come back in 2020, and I think he ended up finishing, was it 8th or something like that? Or at least
I think it was 8th.
Higher. Yeah, it was a lot higher than he did in the first place, and so hopefully he can bring a bit of pace to the MP Motorsport team. Not that they do terribly badly. I think they finished 6th last year. So maybe it can give them a little bit of a boost too.
Yeah, so obviously, like Jackie said, it's an awesome move for him. Obviously didn't finish in the top 3 with finishing 8th in 2020 with 104 points. But yeah, it's more of a development thing, because the last thing you want is him being stuck in F3 and then just being almost stuck there at the top, and then there's no way for improvement, if that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess when you move up into another formula, or a formula that's a step higher, you're going to get that support and that knowledge from a team that knows what it's looking for, knows what it takes to get into F1, which can be just invaluable knowledge, I think. So we'll move on to Oscar Piastri. Obviously, he's moving up to Prema. That's a little bit old news. But I wanted to get your opinions on how you think that move will go, and how racing with or against Robert Schwartzman, what that will do for his driving ability in his career.
I think it'll be great for him, both in helping him mature a bit more as a driver, but also figuring out a good team dynamic where he's not necessarily the senior driver, because when you move up to F1, you're not always going to be that senior driver depending on who's your team.
Yeah, exactly. And even though he performed really well in F3, that jump between formulas is going to be a little bit jarring for him, just like anyone else. So it'll be interesting to see how he goes, especially with a driver like Schwartzman, who's so relatively experienced and performs well.
Well, and also, speaking of Schwartzman, he's the only one left over from that top 5 of last season. So he'll naturally want to be the senior driver of the two and have Oscar as his support. But it's all about what the team actually ends up deciding to do, which we won't see for a few weeks, possibly, into the season.
Yeah, I think it's a good move for him. And it'd be great to see just how that team dynamic turns out, with Oscar not always having to be the very best, and having someone more experienced who's able to learn and grow his driving from Robert.
And it's always good to see an Aussie coming up the ranks, and hopefully he'll be a good successor to our beloved Daniel Ricciardo.
Well, yeah, and like Renault obviously put a lot of stock into Oscar, which helps, like for boosting his own confidence coming up.
And speaking of Renault, Mia Shwartzman, I hope I've pronounced that correctly, said recently that she hoped for more from their F2 drivers. So obviously that can be pretty jarring for the current drivers. Considering how competitive the market is, though, what are your thoughts on those comments?
Yeah, so obviously as a driver, that's probably not the best thing you want to hear, especially it coming out publicly. It's kind of like a massive whack in the face. But yeah, I reckon getting that feedback would kind of help them, and it's kind of motivation into this upcoming season to perform better. But also, I don't think many people probably had the best year in 2020. So, yeah.
No, what I honestly think is that it's getting blown a little bit out of proportion in the sense of they finished 6th and 7th last season. Both Zhao and Christian had a couple of wins and a couple of pole positions and even some fastest laps in there. So naturally, with them finishing 6th and 7th, you go, but they could have been higher. And you just wonder, what was that little thing? Like, was it the retirements, the other like things that went on in the season where they were coming in 12th and such that just stopped them from getting over the line to getting into 5th or 4th or even finishing in the top 3 overall for the season?
That's it. And knowing how competitive motorsport is in general, and as these guys move up from Formula 3, Formula 2, there are fewer and fewer seats. It's more and more competitive. So it's almost the same situation, not exactly the same situation, but almost the same situation as Red Bull has, where they want their drivers to be able to perform the absolute best out of their car, which they need to do, so that they can fight for those titles or they can move up into the next formula. So I would agree with you, Jackie. I think that the comments aren't as harsh as some people, I guess, would interpret them. But yeah, at the same time, it must be hard to hear that after you've tried your best. So I think they'll go back, they'll reset, and they'll go from there.
Yeah, if they're like strong enough athletes, they should go, well, we hoped for more as well. And it should make them want to do better this season.
Yeah, exactly. And that kind of reminds me of Pierre Gasly when he's been moved out of the team, and that gave him a kick. That's a lot harder of a kick, but it moved him forward. And his last season was definitely his best that he's ever raced in Formula One, but in any season. So maybe that'll happen. We'll see how it gets off. Moving on to some F3 news. Arthur Leclerc, he's moving into Formula 3 for Prema alongside Dennis Horger. So what are we thinking? Obviously, he's got a lot to live up to with Charles Leclerc driving the Ferrari for the last couple of years. So does he have a lot of weight on his shoulders, or do you think that he's running straight into this and he's going to take it head on?
I think a bit of both. I think it's going to be enormous pressure as to live up to what Charles has. But yeah, so he did pretty well in F4. He finished 3rd, had 6 wins and 8 pole positions. So it's not like it's going to be a complete throw in the deep end for him. I think it'd be a good challenge for him to move to F3, especially with the likes of, sorry, I'm going to pronounce this wrong, but Piastri with Oscar moving into the F2. I think it'd be a great way for him to develop his racing.
And there's also just pressure on you regardless of whether your brother is up in the F1 ranks or if you're from a nobody family, like that's just come in and is a kid that's doing amazing. Like in the sense of, yes, there's pressure, but there's pressure because there's money being invested into you now. And they want you to succeed and they want you to eventually come up into F1. And that doesn't matter who your family is. Like Mick Schumacher didn't necessarily, wasn't always going to guarantee go up into F1. He did the work he won the F2 championships, and now he's going to drive. I've lost the team that he's going for.
He's driving for Haas.
Yeah, sorry. And Mick Schumacher's going to come in and drive for Haas because of what he's achieved, not because of what his family name has done for him.
Exactly. And like you said, Ali, his recent performance for his whole career within motorsport, he's performed really well pretty much everywhere he's been. So hopefully he'll just move straight into it. Hopefully he'll knuckle down and get some results out of the car, which I see him doing because he's been consistent. And, you know, imagine if he ended up driving for Ferrari too. That'd be incredible, even if alongside his brother. It's probably not a very Ferrari thing for them to choose to do, but it'd be interesting nevertheless. So moving on, Sophia Floersch, I have, again, sorry if I've pronounced that wrong, has come out and said that it's too early for her to turn her back on single-seaters. Hopefully we're going to see her back in Formula 3 soon, especially after seeing her bounce back from the crash she had a few years ago and being able to get back in essentially the same car and still perform pretty well. Obviously, it was a little bit of a disappointing season. But do we think that we'll see her back in single-seaters, or would it be an option for her to move on to something else?
By the sounds of it, she does seem interested, and in the sense of she still enjoys it. So I think that is always a motivating factor to keep going, even if you've had horror crashes or like lacking in results. There's always that motivating factor if you enjoy it. If she stopped enjoying it and was like, well, I want to keep trying because I want to like get up there, especially in the all girls team, but it doesn't really matter in the end if you're not enjoying it, and you'll eventually give up. Like Grosjean said 2 years ago, I think, that if once he stops enjoying F1, he's not going to keep going at it. I think that she'll end up being the same way.
Yeah, I think she's been almost a pioneer in racing for girls for a few years now. So, but yeah, like Jackie said, you neither enjoy it, and if you're not enjoying it, then there's no point continuing on. But I reckon she'll come back and progress along the formula path. And yeah,
exactly. And you see the likes of, you bring up a few drivers before, the likes of Nico Rosberg, when after he won his title, he was like, you know, this racing is just taking too much out of me. And obviously he wasn't enjoying it. Obviously we saw what racing against Lewis Hamilton had done to him, and so he dropped out of it. Whereas Sophia, she's stuck with it for this far, and she's done so well, and she's been able to balance it with the other formulas that she's driving in. You know, she obviously drove in Le Mans, wasn't it? So if you can balance that as well, come back to it and still love it and still be, like you were saying, Ellie, a pioneer, yeah, I think 100% that we'll see her back.
And just the way she talks about it makes you think that she's coming back. Like, there's a passion that you can see where she's still chasing something.
That's it. And we see it almost every year. There's always someone who may not have performed well the season before who will surprise and come straight back through. So, yeah, having that passion would 100% help with that. So, finally, obviously the race weekends are changing a little bit next year. There's going to be shorter practice sessions for the Formula One drivers. That was to make room for all the other formulas and the W Series that are going to be backing up the main races. So what do we think? Do we think this will help at all for Formula 2 and 3, or do you think it'll just be kind of more of a timing thing and not really change much?
My opinion would be don't expect anything so far, just because of how crazy like the past season was. Everything could change in 12 weeks where they go, we can't do it this way, we're going to have to do it a different way again. But I think it will bring more interest into Formula 2 and Formula 3 in the W Series, which that's what they're trying to do. You need to draw attention somehow. And even if it's a change that is somewhat irritating for F1 only fans. I think it helps for the people that are following from the top down.
Yeah, that's it. And it'll bring in the most important thing in F2 and F3, it's sponsorship. Because a lot of these drivers, they have to bring sponsorship to the teams. It's effectively you're paying for your spot. So bringing more attention to it, fans and everything like that, it's going to make it at least somewhat, hopefully, easier for some drivers to be able to find that. And also bringing fans to F2 and F3, because they're, at some points, they can be more interesting races than F1 races. But yeah, what do you think, Ali?
I think it'd be an awesome thing to have more spotlight on the F2, F3 and the W series, and it kind of would be an awesome thing, bringing more attention to it. It'd be awesome to see kind of the drivers progress through the up to Formula One. So normally you probably wouldn't get as much spotlight on the lower ranked races, but now with the less practice time, you're going to get more attention. It's going to bring in more money, and then then these names that some people, F1 fans, might not have heard, will become bigger and bigger and when they reach Formula One, it's kind of everyone would kind of know them, and they'd be kind of household names.
Yeah, exactly. I guess like you said before too, Jackie, we'll just have to wait and see what 2021 holds for us after the crazy season that we've had this year. But he's hoping we'll at least get as good of a season as we had last year.
Yeah, it's all anything could happen in the end. That's my point.
So that's it from Getting a Grip F2 and F3. Head over to the Getting a Grip F1 Instagram and Facebook to stay up to date on our content, and we'll see you next time.
Ricciardo goes for it from a long way back. This would be sensational if he makes it. And do you know what? He has made it. Smiles will be out at 18 years and 227 days old. Max Verstappen wins a Formula One Grand Prix. Lewis Hamilton wins the Portuguese Grand Prix. Hamilton has more wins than any other driver in Formula One history, and he is not done yet.